Assalamualaikum and greetings everyone. So today my group will be presenting about operating systems. So we're going to compare about Windows Server and Ubuntu Server. Before we dive in, I want to introduce the dedicated individual who worked tirelessly on this project. First, Nur Awatif binti Azlan with the matrix number 1230506. Next, Shazwani binti Sabudin 1230504. Ibtisam Shaima binti Zakaria 1230537, and the last one is me, Nur Hamiza binti Muhammad Syahari 1230529. Moving on to the introduction, server operating systems are fundamental to modern IT, managing resources and hosting services. Today, we're going to compare two leading choices, which is Windows Server and Ubuntu Server. While both are robust platforms for essential services like file sharing and web hosting, they differ significantly in areas like architecture, licensing, and security. Understanding these distinctions is crucial for smart decision making. We'll be examining six key aspects: architecture, performance, security, management tools, use cases, and cost. Windows Server offers enterprise-grade solution with Azure integration, while Ubuntu Server provides open-source reliability with strong community support. So, our is to highlight the strengths and limitations of each, helping the user to make informed deployment choices that align with your technical and budget needs. Next, I'm gonna briefly compare Windows Server and Ubuntu Server in system architecture. At their core, Windows Server uses a hybrid kernel balancing performance and modularity, while Ubuntu Server employs a monolithic Linux kernel known for its direct hardware access and performance. For process management, Windows Server is largely GUI based with tools like Task Manager, while Ubuntu Server is CLI based, relying on commands like top and systemctl for efficient control. In memory management, Windows Server uses paging with prioritization and dynamic memory, while Ubuntu Server uses visual memory, swept space, and memory CG groups for flexible resource allocation. Finally, the file system. Windows Server default to NTFS and support ReFS. Ubuntu Server commonly uses EX4 as its default, also supporting robust options like XFS and ZFS. In essence, Windows Server offers a more GUI-centric integrated experience, while Ubuntu Server, with its CLI focus and open source nature, provides immense flexibility and control. Both are powerful, but cater to different preferences and uses cases in server management.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Noawati binti Azlan, metric number 1230506, and I will be presenting regarding the comparison between Windows Server and Ubuntu Server in terms of performance and security. So firstly, let's look at the performance comparison based on four key aspects, which is CPU usage, memory efficiency, disk input output, and also network input output. So firstly, CPU usage. Based on a study by Sub et al. 2022 using Windows Server 2022 and Ubuntu Server 20.04, Windows had lower CPU usage during a distributed denial of service attack, which is around 49.3%, while Ubuntu reached 55.15%. However, Ubuntu was more responsive under stress, with an 80% success rate, compared to just 18% on Windows. So, although it used more CPU, Ubuntu handled the traffic better. Next is memory efficiency. Still in the same test, Windows Server 2022 consumed about 17.3% memory at idle, while Ubuntu 20.04 only used 12.5%. Even under attack, Ubuntu remained more memory efficient. For disk input-output, benchmark tests using Flexible I/O Tester compared Windows Server 2016 and Ubuntu Server 18.04. Ubuntu achieved a much higher write speed, which is 371 MB per second, compared to 194 MB per second on Windows, showing better raw disk throughput. Finally, for network input-output, a case study by Jakic et al. 2021 tested web delivery using Windows Server 2019 and Ubuntu Server 19.04. Windows showed faster and more stable download speeds, especially for large files and dynamic content, while Ubuntu's performance was slightly less consistent. In summary, Ubuntu performs better in terms of CPU, memory, and disk, but Windows Server is more consistent in web-based network performance. Now moving on to security, we compared the systems based on their security model, firewall, authentication, and update management. So firstly, which is security model, Windows Server uses a centralized security model, mainly through Active Directory, group policies, and Windows Defender. This makes it easier for administrators to enforce policies across an organization. In contrast, Ubuntu Server uses a modular and flexible security model, relying on tools like pluggable authentication modules, PAM, AppArmor, and Fail2Ban. Although it's less centralized, it allows fine-tuned control over system access. For firewall management, Windows comes with a GUI-based Defender firewall, while Ubuntu uses UFW, which is uncomplicated firewall, a command line tool that's easy to automate and script for admins who prefer the terminal. In terms of authentication, Windows uses Active Directory with Kerberos, enabling secure single sign-on across a network. Ubuntu uses PAM and sudo for local control, but also supports enterprise integration via SSSD for LDAP or Active Directory logins. Finally, for update management, Windows uses WSOS or manual updates through Microsoft Update. Ubuntu uses apt, with faster access to security patches from the open source community, which gives administrators more control and quicker response to vulnerabilities. In summary, Windows Server offers centralized, policy-driven security suited for large enterprise environments, while Ubuntu provides a more customizable and lightweight security approach, ideal for admins who prefer open source flexibility.
My name is Ibtisam Shaimak binti Zakaria. My metric number is 1230537. Let's begin with a comparison of the management tools used in Windows Server and Ubuntu Server. Windows Server use graphic tools like Windows Admin Center, Server Manager, and Microsoft Management Console (MMC), which offer a centralized and visual way to manage the system. Ubuntu Server does not depend on a graphical interface by default, but it does offer optional tools like Cockpit and Webmin for those who prefer a browser-based experience. For command line tools, Windows includes PowerShell and the command prompt. Ubuntu Server relies on the Bourne Again Shell or Bash, as well as tools like System Control and Journal Control for managing service and viewing logs. When it comes to remote access, Windows Server use Remote Desktop Protocol (RDP) and Windows Remote Management (WinRM). Ubuntu Server typically use Secure Shell, which is fast, secure, and the standard choice for server access. Both systems support automation, but in different ways. Windows use PowerShell scripting and group policy objects to apply settings and rules across systems. Ubuntu supports shell scripting, schedule jobs using cron, and modern tools like Ansible and systemd timers to manage tasks automatically. Overall, Windows is more graphical user interface focused, making it easier for beginners. Ubuntu is command line interface focused, which gives advanced user more control and efficiency. Let's begin with a comparison of the management tools used in Windows Server and Ubuntu Server. Windows Server use graphic tools like Windows Admin Center, Server Manager, and Microsoft Management Console (MMC). Now, let's look at when each operating system is typically used. In enterprise environments, Windows Server is ideal for running Active Directory, applying group policy, and managing services like Microsoft Exchange and SharePoint. Ubuntu can connect to these environments as well, using tools like Samba for file sharing and System Security Service Daemon for directory integration. For hosting applications, Windows Server runs Internet Information Service to support application boot with the .NET framework. Ubuntu, on the other hand,
often runs Apache or Nginx web server as part of the Linux Apache MySQL PHP or Linux Nginx MySQL PHP stack. In terms of database hosting, Windows typically use Microsoft Structure Query language server, while Ubuntu supports open source database like MyStructure Query Language, PostgreSQL, and MongoDB. For cloud deployment, Windows fits well in Microsoft Azure and supports Hyper-V and Windows containers. Ubuntu is more commonly used in Amazon Web Service, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform, and is highly compatible with Docker and Kubernetes for containerized workloads. Lastly, in development operations environments, Windows often relies on external tools, while Ubuntu naturally supports continuous integration and continuous deployment pipelines using Ansible, Jenkins, and GitLab.
Okay, next is cost and licensing. There are three aspects. First, licensing model. Windows Server is a proprietary product. Organization must purchase license based on the number of physical core, with a minimum requirement of 16 core per server. On top of that, every user or device accessing the server legally requires Client Access License or CALs. This licensing requirement can become a significant cost factor, especially as your organization grows. Ubuntu Server, by contrast, is completely free and open source. License under the GPL, you can install and use it as many server and device as you want, without paying for licenses, CAL, or additional user seats. Next, initial setup costs. Deploying Windows Server involves substantial upfront costs, including paying for the server license, purchasing CAL for each user or device, and potentially adding extra fee for advanced features, user update, and cloud integration option. Ubuntu Server doesn't have this cost. You can download it from the official website, install it on a single machine or thousands of servers, and immediately begin configuration and deployment without worrying about license checks or hidden fees. Finally, maintenance and support. Windows Server offers professional support through Microsoft Software Assurance Program, providing guaranteed service level agreements, timely updates, and integration with other Microsoft Enterprise products like Office 365. Ubuntu Server offers more flexibility in this regard. Organizations can rely on free community support and robust online documentation, or opt for paid professional support package through Canonical, such as Ubuntu Pro, for guaranteed security patches, extended maintenance, and advanced features. This means you can tailor support costs and model to fit your needs and budget more precisely. In conclusion, choosing between Windows Server and Ubuntu Server requires a careful look at organizational needs and existing infrastructure. Windows Server works best for those using Microsoft technologies, needing Active Directory integration, and preferring GUI-based management, but it often demands higher hardware resources. On the other hand, Ubuntu Server is more efficient, flexible, and ideal for cloud-native and web-based applications. Third, it focuses on command line management by default. Our recommendation is to select Windows Server for environment centered around Microsoft solution and Ubuntu Server for organizations that value scalability, cost saving, and open source flexibility. Ultimately, consider compatibility, operational needs, and total cost before deciding.